A high-ranking detective and 20-year veteran of the Anoka County Sheriff's Office running from authorities.
And an investigation that at least at first leads another agency that arrives on the scene to believe his colleagues may have helped him to get away. Fox 9's Courtney Godfrey joining us with more on this story. Courtney?
It was an all-night search that sent state patrol across 3 counties over a 7-hour time period in a case that had all the ingredients for a cover-up.
Bar hopping in northeast Minneapolis. A couple hours on a pedal pub and what should have been a fun night out with friends was the beginning of a series of bad decisions for an Anoka County detective.
There's nothing sticky about it. If the guy's wife is injured, where is he?
Less than 30 minutes after he reported leaving a bar on a Thursday night in August, the off-duty law enforcement officer and his seriously injured wife are in a ditch off Highway 65 in East Bethel. And while he tells responding deputies that he was cut off, causing him to crash, an eyewitness paints a very different story.
He kind of just kept getting closer.
Just kind of drifting a little bit?
Yeah, kind of just drifting over, and he just smacked right into it.
Okay.
And he flipped.
Yeah.
A couple times.
Okay.
But Anoka County Detective Patrick O'Hara won't be given a field sobriety test. He won't be breathalyzed or even questioned. In fact, his colleagues who respond to the scene will offer him a ride home.
If you don't go with or whatnot, I can give you a ride home.
Well aware that the man who is behind the wheel is one of their own.
Where's our driver? He's standing next to the passenger side. That's weird. Oh, yeah. Oh, here you go. So, O'Hara. I haven't been up there yet. Somebody swerved in front of him.
Surveillance video from earlier in the night shows the off-duty detective finishing a beer, sharing another with a friend, and taking a shot of Fireball at a Minneapolis bar before leaving for the next spot. While it's the only video evidence of his drinking that night, he later admits to an internal affairs investigator that he consumed 8 drinks during a 4-hour period, an estimate investigators believe is low, and the reason they determine he spends 7 hours on the morning of August 31st, evading law enforcement at every turn. It's here along Highway 65 in East Bethel that Detective Patrick O'Hara will quietly make his getaway, only yards from where deputies are making small talk in the middle of paramedics' efforts to free his wife from the wreckage. Just beyond his wife's cries, O'Hara is seen on dashcam video, crossing the highway and jumping a median. Moments later, getting picked up by his son at a nearby gas station.
Where'd Pat go? I don't know where Pat went. He went and made a phone call.
1 hour after the crash, State Patrol is called in to take over the investigation. And immediately, troopers are suspicious.
No, I want you to ask. What squad car was he in? Because now, to be quite honest with you, I think they're hiding him.
Their suspect is now missing, and yet none of the deputies have any answers for State Patrol. The new lead on the investigation asks dispatch to go off radio so that his buddies can't tip him off.
And I just prefer to do it on the phone so nobody's listening and that nobody warns them.
When investigators show up to O'Hara's Isanti home, they're sure he's inside.
Is Patrick here?
15 with one adult male ahead of him.
One side. Maybe not.
But his son won't let them in without a warrant, and by the time they come back with one, O'Hara is pulling into Minneapolis. Troopers finally get him on the phone by making his son call.
Hey, Patrick, Lieutenant Isaacson with the State Patrol.
Yes, sir.
What are you doing?
I'm seeing my wife at the hospital.
Okay, where are you right now? You know we need to talk to you, right?
O'Hara hangs up on the trooper, and only minutes after arriving at the hospital is once again on the move, stripping down to a white shirt on his way to his car. O'Hara pulls out of the parking garage and isn't seen for another 90 minutes, returning to the hospital just before 7 a.m., where the law will finally catch up with him. 7 hours after fleeing the scene of an injury accident, O'Hara is taken into custody.
Sir, you're making a mistake. I stopped. We provided all our information.
I already told you what we're going to do. I don't want to make this any more difficult. You know what's happened tonight, and we need to take care of it.
When authorities are finally able to do a blood alcohol test, he passes. He'll never be criminally charged.
You have a rollover crash, you have the time of night, you have an injured passenger, and you have an eyewitness saying that they saw the driver swerving. Isn't that usually enough to do a field sobriety test?
It should have been. It should have been.
Lieutenant Dan Douglas is a spokesperson for the Anoka County Sheriff's Office.
It was his decision to carry out the actions he did that night. We were very disappointed, again, with the initial response by our deputies. And as soon as it came to light, was brought to a supervisor, we took the best and quickest corrective action we could that night.
A scathing internal report drafted months later says they believe O'Hara evaded arrest so that he had time to sober up. A licensed peace officer behaved like a criminal and damaged a department's reputation, the report says. And yet O'Hara still wears the uniform today. Demoted to deputy and ordered to work courthouse safety, he makes nearly $40 an hour. A rate that at 40 hours a week would earn him $83,000 a year.
He'd been promoted to the rank of detective and had served in that capacity for 12 years. During those 12 years, he was highly skilled and respected. We're trying to balance all of that out. There were mistakes made. The most egregious was by Mr. O'Hara.
So whether or not you would consider the actions of responding deputies that night or the actions of O'Hara himself a mistake, the department says they're moving on, knowing the video from the night of August 31st will speak for itself, and the actions of now Deputy Patrick O'Hara will have to be prosecuted solely in the court of public opinion.
Now, while suspicions by state troopers that this whole thing was a cover-up were never substantiated, 2 of the responding deputies from the night of the crash were disciplined for their part, suspended for 1 day for, among other things, neglect of duty and violating office policy. The sheriff's office says since the incident, they've added supplemental training for all licensed staff. Kelsey?
Interesting story, Courtney, and such a thorough timeline of that evening as well.
Wow. How many times you're caught on camera in one given night?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. All right. Thanks, Courtney.
Well, up